text starting at 6. But yeah, I want to try and keep a more regular stream schedule, so I'm gonna try and stream every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 p.m. for about an hour. So like, I'm definitely not gonna get through this whole essay today. I'll probably be streaming more of it on future days. I did set it to start actually hanging on to the streams after I've finished, so or after they're posted for like 2 weeks, so people will be able to actually like go and watch the archive of the streams. But yeah, honestly, the main reason I'm using Twitch is because I tried for ages to use OBS to stream to TikTok, and I cannot figure out a way to get any instance of TikTok to recognize a virtual camera as a regular camera. My latest attempt involved downloading Android's app tester software, which can simulate phones, which claims to be able to pull from the computer's camera. I have not been able to make it actually do that. And I am so over my head on like how it actually works that like when I try when I try to Google for it, when I try to find information about the answer, I basically just get like people answering in code, like clearly assuming I already know what programming language I'm like supposed to be using, and like where you enter code into that software. I have no fucking clue. So I am entirely at sea with that right now. And I think it will be another couple months before I get frustrated enough to try again. I made a terrible soup tonight out of reheated soup and tofu. Very hungry. Dargran, today was a lot. I just ate Pop-Tarts because the stove is broken. Relatable. I broke up with my therapist today. It's been a long time since she's been like able to help me. But like I was really hoping to get a new therapist lined up before I stopped seeing my current therapist, because I don't really want to accidentally wind up going another several years without therapy. But fucking nobody in the state takes my insurance, and it was like an hour a week of time that was not useful that I need for my job, which is this, by the way. Mathtrick77, it means good things have transpired because she helped a lot when I first started seeing her, and that's because I was in a shitty relationship. She was really good at helping me with that. She's not good at helping me deal with being mildly internet famous. Just famous enough to be stressful. Yeah. How's everybody else's day going? Finally had to go online with someone nowhere nearby. Yeah, the first batch of places I looked were all places where, like, after quarantine I could start seeing them in person. The second batch I was reaching out all across the state, just like anybody who'd take my insurance. And I think I need to do another round of that. It took me 3 years to find a therapist in ATX. By the way, I'm thinking of doing these like setup streams more often. Let me know if you can think of anything that would help make it work better. I need to find out more ways to put like more monitoring in OBS so that I can see what's going on my Twitch channel. Like, are there people watching right now? Nobody's commented in chat, but I think also anybody who would be is in this as well. Kermit's Prostate, that is a bold choice of a username. Alright, about 10 more minutes before I switch over to Twitch, and on my screen I'm the only Twitch viewer so far. Sir Fopling has said that they are the only Twitch viewer so far. But yeah, I'm gonna be streaming on Twitch in a couple minutes. Reading Cyborg Manifesto by Donna Haraway, which is a very influential piece of formative transhumanism, feminism, and there wasn't really a third thing there. Transhumanism and feminism. It's like transhumanism from before the cis dudes ruined it. Yep. Having dinner before going live on Twitch. I realize that this is very boring to watch. I'm sorry. But it's also over. Yeah, I'm... Dargram, thanks for dropping in. Arguably the first post-humanist feminist work. It has some transhumanist themes, but I'm not sure I see mostly as a reaction against humanism. Reading a comment on Twitch. Sir Fopling, I'm not sure that I think that the distinction between transhumanism and post-humanism is that meaningful. I'm such a fucking dumbass. Oh. I'm gonna take my Adderall and see how this works. Hi, Simaranth. I just accidentally took my sleeping med. Because I am not good at pills. I make the distinction only that post-humanism isn't necessarily futuristic, while transhumanism usually has those connotations. Yeah, that's, I suppose, reasonable. You could argue that post-humanism is a supercategory that contains transhumanism, but I think that in practice, that distinction doesn't really exist. But, it's about 5 minutes before the Twitch stream starts. I'm going to flip you guys back around and point the camera at OBS while I do some final setting up. I think it just occurred to me that I don't have the donation information on this screen. David Ella, I am starting at 6, so I will be reading in just a little bit. Yeah, I think I'm going to leave the camera pointed at... Actually, you know what I can do? I can change this to... Dialog boxes are a problem. There. Just leave that up and we'll do the reading on here. Alright, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started because I don't have a ton to do apart from that. I believe I've got just about everything done. If there's anything I haven't done, I'm not going to think of it in the next 2 minutes. Yeah. This is Donna Haraway's A Cyborg Manifesto. An ironic dream of a common language for women in the integrated circuit. This essay is an effort to build an ironic political myth, faithful to feminism, socialism, and materialism. I forgot to turn on my toolbar because... Acrobat is just the worst. It's not the worst, it's the best app that there is for this, and that's really bad. Perhaps more faithful as blasphemy is faithful than as reverent worship and identification. Blasphemy has always seemed to require taking things very seriously. I know no better stance to adopt from within the secular religious evangelical traditions of United States politics, including the politics of socialist feminism. Blasphemy protects one from the moral majority within while still insisting on the need for community. That's a super interesting idea. But blasphemy is a way to challenge the sacred without giving up on the notion that there are sacred things. In this case, community. Blasphemy is not apostasy. Irony is about contradictions that do not resolve into larger wholes, even dialectically, about the tension of holding incompatible things together because both or all are necessary and true. Irony is about humor and serious play. It is also a rhetorical strategy and a political method, one I would like to see more honored within socialist feminism. At the center of my ironic faith, my blasphemy, is the image of a cyborg. So this is something, last time I read this essay was many years ago, and it was very difficult for me. This makes much more sense to me now, and I am super curious to hear anybody who's watching if you have comments on that passage and whether and to what extent it makes sense to you. A cyborg is a cybernetic organism, a hybrid of machine and organism, a creature of social reality as well as a creature of fiction. Social reality is lived social relations, our most important political construction, a world-changing fiction. This is a definition, marking it in green. The international women's movements have constructed women's experience as well as uncovered or discovered this crucial collective object. This experience is a fiction and fact of the most crucial political kind. Liberation rests on the construction of the consciousness, the imaginative apprehension of oppression, and so of possibility. I need to read that sentence again. This experience is a fiction and fact of the most crucial political kind. What she's doing here is she is Hey Moz, I don't want to interrupt. I'm just curious what they're doing. If you are asking that on Discord, oh no, wait, I can't put this on either window without revealing my whole Discord. I am on Twitch right now, and if anybody who's in my Discord wants to jump in voice chat, you're welcome to join me. You will be fully audible to anybody who's watching. But so yeah, what she's doing here is this experience is a fiction and fact of the most crucial political kind. She's exploring the irony that she said she was going to explore in the previous paragraph. Saying that, like, this tension that doesn't resolve into... what did she say? Irony is about contradictions that do not resolve into larger wholes, even dialectically. And so this is an example of that irony that doesn't resolve into a larger whole. Liberation rests on the construction of the consciousness, the imaginative apprehension of oppression, and so of possibility. I can't remember what apprehension means. To Google. What did I leave open? Yeah, Twitch instructions. Understanding and grasp. That's the sense in which she's using apprehension there. The imaginative apprehension, so that's... Hi, Saria. I am hanging out on Twitch reading a Cyborg Manifesto by Donna Haraway. And I am streaming me on Twitch on TikTok because Twitch has no discovery. So there's no way for people to find me that way. Twitch is definitely the better place to be watching if you want to be able to follow along because as far as I understand, this text should be legible there. And I am very confident that it is not on TikTok. Liberation rests in the construction of the consciousness, the imaginative apprehension. So in this, she's using the word consciousness here in like the Marxist sense of like class consciousness. Sir Fopling, why use apprehension when you can just use grok? You could absolutely just use grok. One of the things that she's doing here in using this dense and academic language is demonstrating to academics that she is credible and to be taken seriously. And that's definitely something particularly feminist authors have to do. Their works often spend a lot of time strongly identifying and exploring that tension that, like, they know they could be writing more accessibly. And they know that there are ways that they could be writing this stuff that would be easier for the audience they care most about to grok. But if they do that, then they won't get published. They won't be taken seriously in the field. So the construction of the consciousness there, she's talking about like consciousness in the sense of class consciousness. That's like a larger awareness among many people. I was definitely joking there, but you turned it into a good teaching moment. Yeah, no, jokes are a great way to pivot into teaching moments. I think joke comments on my TikToks have been some of the best segues into like deeper exploration of the themes of those TikToks that I've had. So the imaginative apprehension of oppression and so of possibility, there, I want to spend some time thinking about, we're talking about, hi Tess, I'm streaming on Twitch, and streaming Twitch on TikTok, because Twitch doesn't do discovery. But yeah, imaginative apprehension is a phrase that I really want to take some time unpacking. Because she could have just said apprehension. Like, to just say that people understand this thing would have been enough to talk about, like, class consciousness, but to say imaginative apprehension emphasizes the idea of a leap there that is not strictly logical, which is one of the things that she's spending a lot of time and effort addressing here. Cimaranth, yes, that is my housemate's cat. My housemate's cat has no respect for whether or not I'm live streaming. And so to say that you apprehend oppression and so possibility is to say that you have to move beyond just understanding into a creative force for understanding. Yeah, that's an excellent way of putting it. But yeah, the idea here that imagining oppression means imagining possibility, that that communicates the idea like you can't think about how your life could be better if you don't recognize that there's anything wrong with it. And that's like the sort of fundamental idea of Marxist class consciousness and communist class consciousness. Because class consciousness is not a strictly Marxist idea. The cyborg is a matter of fiction and lived experience. So that's another irony, another use of that juxtaposition that changes what counts as women's experience in the late 20th century. It also occurs to me that I just spent a really long time talking about this sentence. It's ridiculous that I haven't highlighted it. This is a struggle over life and death, but the boundary between science fiction and social reality is an optical illusion. Yeah, Donna Haraway is one of the really significant figures in bringing connections between science fiction and academia and feminism. I think the other biggest figure in that field is Joanna Russ, who I have complicated feelings about, and if you ever want to hear a long discussion about radical feminism and like the cases where radical feminism is useful but also definitely still transphobic, ask me about Joanna Russ. Contemporary science fiction is full of cyborgs, creatures simultaneously animal and machine, who populate worlds ambiguously natural and crafted. Modern medicine is also full of cyborgs, of couplings between organism and machine, each conceived as coded devices, an intimacy with a power that was not generated in the history of sexuality. Science fiction does tend to reflect or directly influence society. Yeah, it definitely does both. Even more complicated feelings about Land's ideas on science fiction and feminism. My feelings on Land are less complicated. I don't feel particularly compelled to be strongly charitable to Nick Land. I think Nick Land is the strongest case for the position that in the field of philosophy it is still possible to go mad in a way that is just like consistent with the classical understanding of going mad, where it's just that your brain stops being right and like there's no like specific Cimaranth. Nick Land is a philosopher. He's most well known for his contributions to accelerationism, and he became a radical conservative fascist after doing too many drugs and not sleeping for like a whole semester, and then getting really, really, really obsessed with some random dude's blog, some random monarchist's blog. And yeah, he's like a super interesting figure to talk about and to think about, because he's definitely like, he's brilliant in a way that a lot of the like intellectual dark web people want people to think they're brilliant, but he's also fucking insane. And I think he's a really good case for the necessity of the existence of terms like insanity and craziness and like madness, because they get at something that is different than mental illness, which is to say just beliefs that are unmoored from reality to the point where you can't engage with them on terms as a reality. Cyborg sex restores some of the lovely replicative baroque of ferns and invertebrates, such as nice organic prophylactics against heterosexism. Cyborg replication is uncoupled from organic reproduction. See, this right here, this is something I was just talking to a new acquaintance of mine about how interesting this kind of thing is. I can tell that what Russ is doing here is a joke. I don't get it, and I think that like a feminist reading this in the late 80s, early 90s would get it, because it would be like an obvious reference to something that like, I get that it has something to do with like birth control and condoms and stuff like that, but I feel like there's a much more specific joke there that I just don't have access to, and that's one of the things that makes academic texts hard to read sometimes, is just that the author is being funny, and the audience for that joke is not whoever you are. So like, if you're reading academic texts, one of the things to keep an eye out for when you hit sentences that are just deeply confusing is this kind of shaped like a joke? Because if it is, it might not be something you need to think about. It might be something you can just like move on past. So cyborg replication is uncoupled from organic reproduction. Modern production seems like a dream of cyborg colonization work, a dream that makes the nightmare of Taylorism seem idyllic. Taylorism is a word I don't know, but I know that I have heard it before. I will look it up later. And modern war is a cyborg orgy, coded by C3I, Command Control Communication Intelligence, an $84 billion item in the 1984 U.S.'s defense budget. I am making an argument for the cyborg as a fiction mapping our social and bodily reality, and as an imaginative resource suggesting some very few fruitful couplings. Michel Foucault's biopolitics is a flaccid premonition of cyborg politics, a very open field. Samaranth, yes, there are so many jokes in academic texts. They're very common. Like this right here, this is snark. Michel Foucault's biopolitics is a flaccid premonition of cyborg politics. What she's doing there is, first, she's making fun of Foucault, and second, she's preemptively subverting or preemptively countering the people who are going to say Foucault already talked about this. So, like, it's a dig both at Foucault and at a certain kind of reader who wants to attribute new developments in this field of ideas to being, like, insignificant because they are hinted at in Foucault. In sort of the same way that there are Marxists who say, like, well, Marx predicted the internet, so we don't really need to think about, like, contemporary theory to talk about the way that Marxist theory differs from the internet, differs from like contemporary working class circumstances. By the late 20th century, our time, a mythic time, we are all chimeras, theorized and fabricated hybrids of machine and organism. In short, we are cyborgs. The cyborg is our ontology. It gives us our politics. The cyborg is a condensed image both of both imagination and material reality, the two joined centers structuring any possibility of historical transformation. In the traditions of Western science and politics, Taylorism is a 19th century scientific management. It's what broke factory work down into simple repetitive tasks. Thank you. So it's like similar to Fordism, but sounds like Fordism is maybe a later development on Taylorism. But in the tradition of Western science and politics, the tradition of racist, male-dominated capitalism, the tradition of progress, the tradition of the appropriation of nature as a resource for the production of culture, the tradition of reproduction of the self from the reflections of the other, the relation between organism and the machine, has been a border war. That was... So I'm going to go through this and highlight it in two colors. The back and forth between positive or neutral phrasing and phrasing that is hostile to this intellectual tradition. Oh, whoops, I missed a step there. The stakes in the border war have been territories of production, reproduction, and imagination. This chapter is an argument for pleasure in the confusion of boundaries and for responsibility in their construction. That is a fascinating and very queer idea. It is also an effort to contribute to socialist feminist culture in theory in a postmodernist non-naturalist mode in the utopian tradition of imagining a world without gender. What do the colors represent? Okay, so I did a series on my TikTok a while back about the way that I use color in highlighting. Orange and green are sort of my backup colors. They're for just sort of whatever. In general, I use orange for things that I think the author wants to draw my attention to. Or when I was in school, I used orange for, I don't really care about this, but I know that the teacher wants me to notice. Now I just use it for like things that I know the author wants me to pay attention to. And green I use for things that I am excited about or interesting in, but are not like major central ideas. So like here, the orange is highlighting the neutral or positive descriptions of modernity and capitalism, and the green is highlighting the criticisms. And then the yellow is key ideas. Hi, Kat. I am talking about the Cyborg Manifesto on Twitch, and also streaming Twitch on TikTok, because Twitch has like no discovery. So the yellow is key ideas in the text, and the blue is just stuff that particularly interests me. It is also an effort to contribute to the socialist feminist culture and theory in a postmodernist non-naturalist mode. Alright, so this is a quick summary of the thing that the Cyborg Manifesto is famous for, which is attempting to contribute to what was at the time contemporary feminism, a sort of way out of essentialism, and a way out of centering feminism on women's bodies and the kind of like turf shit, the centering of the conversation on which bodies have essential qualities of womanness. And in the utopian tradition of imagining a world without gender, which is perhaps a world without genesis, but maybe also a world without end. The cyborg incarnation is outside salvation history. That's an interesting line. Nor does it mark time on an edible calendar, attempting to heal the terrible cleavages of gender in an oral symbiotic utopia or post-edible apocalypse. So this is saying that, like, people embracing cyborg as a way of understanding themselves are not bound to the, like, conventional loop of, like, human psychology the way that we expect it from Freud. As Zoe Sophoulis argues in her unpublished manuscript on Jacques Lacan, and this is the last color in the set of highlights that I didn't mention. I use pink for references to other people's work. The most terrible and perhaps most promising monsters in cyborg worlds are embodied in non-edible narratives with a different logic of repression, which we need to understand for our survival. That is a fucking incredible thought. And, alright, so the reference there is just see Zoe Sophoulis, not published at time of printing. The cyborg is a creature in a post-gender world. It has no truck with bisexuality, pre-Oedipal symbiosis, unalienated labor, or other seductions to organic wholeness through a final appropriation of all the powers of the parts into a higher unity. In a sense, the cyborg has no origin story in the Western sense. A final irony, since the cyborg is also the awful apocalyptic telos of the West's escalating dominations of abstract individuation, an ultimate self, united at last from all dependency, a man in space. So where was the word telos in there? The awful apocalyptic telos from all, or of the West's escalating dominations of abstract individuation. So telos is a philosophical term that means end, and like this is telos in the sense of teleology, which is the metaphysical study of things in terms of what their end is, like what they're supposed to wind up being. And I think that's about as detailed as I can get about teleology coherently off the top of my head, because I am not really into metaphysics at all. An origin story in the Western humanist sense depends on the myth of original unity, fullness, bliss, and terror, represented by the phallic mother from whom all humans must separated. The task... this line is another one of those ironies. The paper opened with a discussion of irony and the necessity of irony in this topic of phallic mother being an example of an ironic juxtaposition of concepts. The task of individual development of history, the twin potent myths inscribed most powerfully for us in psychoanalysis and Marxism. Hilary Klein has argued that both Marxism and psychoanalysis, in their concepts of labor and individuation and gender formation, depend on the plot of original unity out of which the difference must be produced and enlisted in a drama of escalating domination of women/nature. And this is a major criticism of Marxism, is that in a lot of conceptions of Marxism, a lot of theorists critical of Marxist thought argue that it will not actually end the it will end the capitalist mode of production, but it wouldn't end the acceleration towards an environmental apocalypse or the exploitation of women in that system. The cyborg skips the step of original unity, identification with nature in the Western sense. This is its illegitimate promise that might lead to a subversion of its teleology as Star Wars. I think that she's going to get to this bit here. Its teleology as Star Wars is the thing that I was referencing in that TikTok, that the term cyborg was coined by the U.S. government, talking about space and people in space and existing in environments that are fundamentally hostile. I don't know when she gets to that. So I don't know. Right now, so far it's been just kind of like a shadow haunting the text that eventually we're going to open a door and the government will be there. But so far she's just making sort of sly comments asides to it. And that can make a text like this confusing to read on the first time through if you're not already familiar with the ideas that she's referencing. The cyborg is resolutely committed to partiality, irony, intimacy, and perversity. It is oppositional, utopian, and completely without innocence. No longer structured by the polarity of public and private, the cyborg defines a technological poles based partly on a revolution or of a social relations in the oikos, the household. Nature and culture are reworked. The one can no longer be the resource for appropriation or incorporation by the other. I want to talk about what she did right here for a sec as well, because what she's doing here is she could have just said the household, obviously. The reason that she said the oikos, the household, is that for people who know what oikos means, for people who are already familiar with the research and the theory in this area, who will have a closely established understanding of exactly what she means by household when she uses that word for it, that helps direct those people toward a clearer understanding. But then she's specifying the household because she's not actually expecting all of her audience to be familiar with that scholarship. And that means that the text is going to be a little bit harder for them, but the text was always going to be a little bit harder for them. And also that means that if they are very confused about what she means by household, they can follow up with that term she used and see what it means in other scholarship. Nature and culture are reworked. The one can no longer be the resource for appropriation or incorporation by the other. The relationships for forming wholes from parts, including those of polarity and hierarchical domination, are at issue in the cyborg world. Unlike the hopes of Frankenstein's monster, the cyborg does not expect its father to save it through a restoration of the garden, that is, through the fabrication of a heterosexual mate. Though its completion in a finished whole, through its completion in a finished whole, a city and cosmos. The cyborg does not dream of community on the model of the organic family, this time without the edible project. The cyborg would not recognize the Garden of Eden. It is not made of mud and cannot dream of returning to dust. Perhaps that is why I want to see if cyborgs can subvert the apocalypse of returning to nuclear dust in the manic compulsion to name the enemy. That's fascinating and a really interesting point. So she was writing this during the Cold War. What she's saying here is that the origin myths of humans that have us made from mud and returning to dust suggest. Kat, thank you for coming. I'm going to be trying to do these streams Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 6. Yeah, the idea that we imagine ourselves as returning to dust, the idea that we imagine ourselves being made of earth, creates a narrative sense that like it is appropriate for our existence to end by all of us being returned to dust. The biblical references all throughout this paper are very interesting. It gives a different flavor than a lot of other theory from this time. Yeah, and she's definitely like the flavor, the affect of the text is something that she's like really working with here. The emotional character of this text is definitely something that like is supposed to be an argument unto itself. Cyborgs are not reverent. They do not remember the cosmos. They are wary of holism, but needy for connection. They seem to have a natural feel for united front politics, but without the vanguard party. The main trouble with cyborgs, of course, is that they are the illegitimate offspring of militarism and patriarchal capitalism, not to mention state socialism. But illegitimate offspring are often exceedingly unfaithful to their origins. Their fathers, after all, are inessential. So this passage right here used to be my desktop background. But yeah, this is basically saying that like cyborgs come from and like the concept of cyborg comes from and was invented by all of the things that Haraway wants to use it to combat. She's basically saying that like this is something that these institutions, these systems created, then cast aside as grotesque and disgusting, the way she was talking about Frankenstein earlier. The idea of a cyborg thus being cast off therefore has no obligation or no necessary affection for those systems. HEW Roberts 19. What does the cyborg represent? Sorry. It's so I'll pop back up to the top real quick. No worries. It's not exactly that the cyborg represents something. It's that the cyborg is a mythic figure that Haraway is cultivating a story around. The essay opens with, "This essay is an effort to build an ironic political myth faithful to feminism, socialism, and materialism." Simaranth, just a question about philosophy in general. Are you allowed to make logical assumptions, or is that taboo? Because my philosophy teacher in high school shut me down by telling me that I can't make assumptions. It depends on what you're doing. Ideally, you would want to avoid ever having to make assumptions. Like, you'd want to be able to justify anything you believe. And if you're strictly learning like formal logic, then yeah, you can't make any assumptions. Like that's making assumptions about what should be true about the world in formal logic is like doing algebra and making assumptions about what number the x probably is. But that said, it's not necessarily the case that like assumptions are always fundamentally wrong in philosophy. Often they can be a good way to reach a place that you want to start working towards, but in like a normal philosophical process, you might reach a conclusion any number of ways, but then you would want to like do the work to make sure that there is a like logical sequence of justifications that makes that conclusion justifiable. But that's also something that like is a fairly modernist way of looking at philosophy. And if you are particularly interested in postmodernism, then there's going to be a lot of discussion on what's wrong with that way of thinking and what kind of ideas are essentially unnecessarily forsworn by it. At will return to the science fiction of cyborgs at the end of this chapter, but now I want to signal three crucial boundary breakdowns that make the following political-fictional, political-scientific analysis possible. By the late 20th century in the United States scientific culture, the boundary between human and animal is thoroughly breached. So she's about to list a series of concepts that she says are important, so I want to highlight those as I go through. The last beachheads of uniqueness have been polluted, if not turned into amusement parks. Language, tool use, social behavior, and mental events, nothing really convincingly settles the separation of human and animal. And many people no longer feel a need for such a separation. Indeed, many branches of feminist culture affirm the pleasure of connection of human and other living creatures. Movements for animal rights are not irrational denials of human uniqueness. They are a clear-sighted recognition of the connection across the discredited breach of nature and culture. Biology and evolutionary theory over the last 2 centuries have simultaneously produced modern organisms as objects of knowledge and reduced the line between humans and animals to a faint trace re-etched in ideological struggle or professional disputes between life and social science. Within this framework, teaching modern Christian creationism should be fought as a form of child abuse. So that's a strong claim that I don't know if she comes back to, but it's interesting. Biological determinist ideology is only one position opened up in scientific culture for arguing the meanings of human animality. There is much room for radical political people to contest the meanings of the breached boundary. Useful references to left and or feminist radical science movements and theory and to biological biotechnical issues include list of citations. The cyborg appears in myth precisely where the boundary between human and animal is transgressed. Far from signaling a walling off of people from other living beings, cyborgs signal disturbingly and pleasurably tight coupling. Bestiality, it has a new status in this cycle of marriage exchange. And taking a moment to see whether I'm about to get banned from live. No, I think I'm good. The second leaky distinction is between animal-human and machine, or animal-human organism and machine. Pre-cybernetic machines could be haunted. There was always a specter of ghost in the machine. This dualism structured the dialogue between materialism and idealism that was settled by a dialectical progeny called spirit or history, according to taste. But basically, machines were not self-moving, self-designing, autonomous. They could not achieve man's dream, only mock it. They were not man, an author to himself, but only a caricature of that masculinist reproductive dream. To think they were otherwise was paranoid. Now we are not so sure. Late 20th century machines have made thoroughly ambiguous the difference between natural and artificial, mind and body, self-developing and externally designed, and many other distinctions that used to apply to organisms and machines. Our machines are disturbingly lively, and we ourselves frighteningly inert. Technological determination is only one ideological space opened up by the reconceptions of machine and organism as coded texts through which we engage in the play of writing and reading the world. And that footnote is more citations. And places to continue reading if you're interested in that sentence. Textualization of everything in post-structuralist, postmodernist theory has been damned by Marxists and socialist feminists for its utopian disregard for the lived relations of domination that ground the play of arbitrary reading. It is certainly true that postmodernist strategies like my cyborg myth subvert myriad organic wholes, for example, the poem, the primitive culture, the biological organism. In short, the certainty of what counts as nature, a source of insight and promise of innocence, is undermined, probably fatally. The transcendent authorization of interpretation is lost, and with it the ontology grounding Western epistemology. But the alternative is not cynicism or faithlessness, that is, some version of abstract existence like the accounts of technological determinism destroying man by the machine or meaningful political action by the text. Who cyborgs will be is a radical question. The answers are a matter of survival. Both chimpanzees and artifacts have politics, so why shouldn't we? So these are a couple of very interesting passages. The third distinction is a subset of the second. The boundary between physical and non-physical is very imprecise for us. Pop physics books on the consequences of quantum theory and the indeterminacy principle are a kind of popular scientific equivalent to Harlequin romances, as a marker of radical change in the American white heterosexuality. They get it wrong, but they are on the right subject. Sorry, I just realized that this footnote was not just a, hey, read some things. This is stuff that I'm going to want to look into later, but it's also dense and detailed and pointing to a lot of other texts, so I don't think it's the right time to jump into it on this live. The third distinction is a subset of the second. The boundary between the physical and non-physical is very imprecise for us. Pop physics books on the consequences of quantum theory and the indeterminacy principle are a kind of popular scientific equivalent to Harlequin romances as a marker of radical change in American white heterosexuality. They get it wrong, but they're on the right subject. Modern machines are quintessentially microelectronic devices. They are everywhere and they are invisible. Modern machinery is an irreverent upstart god, mocking the Father's ubiquity and spirituality. The silicon chip is a surface for writing. It is etched in molecular scales and disturbed only by atomic noise, the ultimate interference for nuclear scores. Writing, power, and technology are old partners in Western stories of the origin of civilization. But miniaturization has changed our experience of the mechanism. Miniaturization has turned out to be about power. Small is not so much beautiful as preeminently dangerous, as in cruise missiles. Contrast the TV sets of the 1950s or the news cameras of the 1970s with the TV wristbands or handheld or hand-sized video cameras now advertised. Our best machines are made of sunshine. They are all light and clean because they are nothing but signals and electromagnetic waves, a section of a spectrum, and these machines are eminently portable, mobile, a matter of immense human pain in Detroit and Singapore. This escalated quickly. This is another example of that irony. She's talking about all of the really cool and interesting things about technology and then crashes into the fact that that this technology is predicated on deeply exploitative and painful industry structures. People are nowhere near so fluid, being both material and opaque. Cyborgs are either. Quintessence. The ubiquity and invisibility of cyborgs is precisely why these sunshine belt machines are so deadly. They are hard to see politically as materially. They are about consciousness, or its simulation. They are floating signifiers moving in pickup trucks across Europe, blocked more effectively by the witch weavings of the displaced and so unnatural Greenham women who read the cyborg webs of power so very well than by the militant labor of older masculinist politics whose natural constituency needs defense jobs. This is a passage I don't understand. I'm going to mark it in lavender because I want to come back to it and look into what she's trying to reference here. Ultimately, the hardest science is about the realm of the greatest boundary confusion, the realm of pure number, pure spirit, C3I, cryptography, and the preservation of potent secrets. The new machines are so clean and light. Their engineers are sun worshippers, mediating a new scientific revolution associated with the night dream of post-industrial society. The diseases evoked by these clean machines are no more than the minuscule coding changes of an antigen in the immune system, no more than the experience of stress. The nimble figures of, quote, Oriental women, the old fascination of little Anglo-Saxon Victorian girls with dolls' houses, women's enforced attention to the small take on quite new dimensions in this world. There might be a cyborg Alice taking account of these new dimensions. Ironically, it might be the unnatural cyborg women making chips in Asia and spiral dancing in Santa Rita jail whose constructed unities will guide effective oppositional strategies. So my cyborg myth is about transgressed boundaries, potent fusions, and dangerous possibilities which progressive people might explore as one part of needed political work. One of my premises is that most American socialists and feminists see deepened dualisms of mind and body, animal and machine, idealism and materialism in the social practices, symbiotic formulations, and physical artifacts associated with high technology and scientific culture. Excuse me. From One-Dimensional Man, Marcuse, 1964, and Death of Nature, Merchant, 1980, the analytic resources developed by progressives have insisted on the necessary domination of technics and recalled us to an imagined organic body to integrate our resistance. Another of my premises is that the need for unity of people trying to resist worldwide intensification of domination has never been more acute. But a slightly perverse shift of perspective might better enable us to contest for meanings, as well as for other forms of power and pleasure in the technologically mediated societies. From one perspective, a cyborg world is about the final imposition of grid control on the planet, about the final abstraction embodied in Star Wars apocalypse waged in the name of defense, about the final appropriation of women's bodies in a masculinist orgy of war. Sophia, 1984. From another perspective, a cyborg world might be about lived social and bodily realities, in which people are not afraid of their joint kinship with animals and machines, not afraid of permanently partial identities and contradictory standpoints. The political struggle is to see from both perspectives at once, because each reveals both dominations and possibilities unimaginable from the other vantage point. Single vision produces worse illusions than double vision or many-headed monsters. Cyborg unities are monstrous and illegitimate. In our present political circumstances, we could hardly hope for a more potent myths for resistance and recoupling. I like to imagine LAG, the Livermore Action Group, as a kind of cyborg society dedicated to realistically converting the laboratories that most fiercely embody and spew out the tools of technological apocalypse, and committed to building a political form that actually manages to hold together witches, engineers, elders, perverts, Christian mothers, and Leninists long enough to disarm the state. Fission Impossible is the name of the affinity group in my town. Affinity, not related by blood, but by choice, the appeal of one chemical nuclear group of another, avidly. Alright, that's the end of that section, and it's also just about the end of my voice. So I think that is where I'm going to close off for tonight. I will be resuming this reading on Friday. And let's see, based on that, I got through 8 pages tonight. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, it should be easy to get through the next section in the next stream. Everyone who came, thanks for coming. Folks who are still watching on TikTok, hope you had a good time. Check me out on Twitch. And yeah, I'm going to stop streaming on both now. So, good night.